Cloning people? Waking up with memories only to find out you're a clone afterwards? Sounds unreal, yes? Well, that is pretty much the premise of the movie They Cloned Tyrone, starring John Boyega, Jamie Foxx, and Teyonah Parris in lead roles. Let's get into the movie without further ado, shall we? The events take place in the ghetto Glen, where a drug dealer named Fontaine receives information from a young boy about rival dealers selling drugs in his territory. Together, they head to the location and Fontaine runs over one of the dealers with his car. The injured dealer warns Fontaine that his boss, Isaac, will seek revenge. Following his routine, Fontaine visits a store and purchases some drinks and a lottery ticket. But he doesn't get lucky and loses the lottery as usual. On his way out, he treats an old beggar named Frog to a drink before heading home, which he shares with his mother, who rarely leaves her room. In the kitchen, he has a photo of his deceased brother Ronald hanging on the fridge. One day, Fontaine's supplier visits him after failing to collect money from a pimp named Slick Charles, and Fontaine confronts him. He then seeks information from a hooker named Bitty about the pimp's whereabouts. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Fontaine, Isaac is keeping a close watch on him. Simultaneously, one of Slick's hookers, Yo-Yo, decides to retire. Fontaine visits Slick to collect the money owed. They engage in an argument, but Fontaine eventually gets his money and leaves. However, just as he is about to depart, Isaac and his dealer ambush and shoot him dead. The next morning, to the audience's surprise, Fontaine wakes up from a nightmare. Later on, he goes to the store as usual, buys drinks and purchases a lottery ticket. On the way, he notices a wounded man on the road. Fontaine takes the man into his car and quickly drives away. Back home, his mother remains locked in her room. Fontaine goes to the pimp to collect his money. Slick is shocked to see him since Fontaine was supposedly killed the previous night. Yo-Yo, who also witnessed the incident, confirms that she heard the gunshots and saw the car leaving the scene. She says she remembers seeing a similar car in one of the neighborhoods. The trio goes there, and Fontaine identifies a house to which the car belonged. Yo-Yo and Slick follow him inside, discovering an eerie elevator leading downstairs. Curiosity drives them to descend, and they find themselves in a laboratory and see a peculiar white man with African-American hair. Fontaine tries to get answers from him about the place and what he does, but the man remains uncooperative. Slick finds some powder, tastes it, and concludes it's a drug. After ingesting the powder, Slick begins to act strangely, giggling and twitching. Fontaine asks Slick to watch over the man while he searches the laboratory. However, Slick accidentally shoots the man, killing him. Yo-Yo at once takes everyone to her grandmother's house. Slick thinks they should lay low, but Fontaine wants to return and investigate everything further. Yo-Yo persuades him to stay. In the morning, Fontaine and his crew storm into the same house from the night before. However, once inside, they find the place has changed and the elevator is nowhere to be seen. His companions start thinking that Fontaine is acting strangely. He decides to return to Yo-Yo and Slick, sharing his bizarre disappearance of the elevator. The trio decides to head to a nearby diner, where they have chicken and discuss the peculiar events, trying to lighten the mood. Slick notices that everyone around them seems unusually happy, realizing something is amiss. To their surprise, the diner manager bears a striking resemblance to the man they encountered in the laboratory, a white man with an afro hairstyle. Yo-Yo flirts with the manager, seizing an opportunity to explore his office secretly. There, she stumbles upon alarming evidence: cameras surveilling the entire neighborhood and disturbing experiments conducted on people. Yo-Yo rushes back to share the shocking news with Fontaine and Slick. Eager to get to the bottom of it, while tailing the suspicious van, Yo-Yo finds a photo of Fontaine's brother. As the story unfolds, Fontaine reveals that a police officer killed his brother. The van leads him to a barbershop where Yo-Yo and Fontaine venture inside while Slick investigates the van. Inside the barbershop, Yo-Yo discovers the unsettling truth about the hair dye. It makes people relaxed and compliant. They are caught off guard by the barbershop manager, who is surprised to see Fontaine alive, and he is believed he had personally killed him. Meanwhile, Slick is abducted, and the van he is investigating disappears. Fontaine believes that Frog, the old beggar, might know where the mystery's van went. The beggar points from them to a church, where they locate the man and manage to release Slick. Out of curiosity, they explore the church and find that people inside are behaving oddly, excessively cheerfully and animated. Fontaine, Yo-Yo and Slick disguise themselves and investigate by going down the strange pathway that opens. They find a facility that houses numerous people who are being experimented upon, like lab rats. As they explore further, they find clones of individuals, including Slick. Overwhelmed by anger and frustration, Slick tries to eliminate his clone. However, this triggers a security alert, forcing the trio to flee. Their escape leads them to a nightclub, which, without knowledge, is run by a DJ clone under Nixon's control. The hypnotic music compels Slick and the clubgoers to dance and act under Nixon's command. Fontaine musters his strength to drag Slick away from the club with a crowd of entranced people trailing behind them. A white man named Nixon and Fontaine claim to show up to halt them three. Nixon reveals that scientists conduct experiments on impoverished, predominantly black populations, including the Glen, to allow the operation to go unnoticed and supposedly achieve peace in America. Defeated, the trio is released with the knowledge that Nixon can easily eliminate them if they become a threat. The next morning, Yo-Yo visits Fontaine, urging him to stand against Nixon. However, Fontaine shows no interest in changing his life and has accepted his fate. He continues to live as before. On one occasion, he knocks on his mother's door again, but this time he breaks in and out of frustration to find only a dictaphone, revealing that his mother has been gone for a long time. In the morning, Yo-Yo writes a letter to the Washington Post expressing her concerns about the suspicious experiments conducted in the neighborhood. As she dropped the letter into the mailbox, she was abducted and forced into a car. Worried about Yo-Yo's disappearance, Fontaine turned to Slick for help. They decide to meet with Yo-Yo, and they discover she has been kidnapped. Yo-Yo finds herself in Nixon's capacity, destined to be a subject of his experiments. Fontaine and Slick rack their brains to devise a plan to rescue Yo-Yo. Fontaine approaches Isaac, seeking help, but Isaac refuses to believe the claims about experiments in their neighborhood. In a shocking twist, Isaac once again shoots Fontaine dead, and his lifeless body is discarded on the street and swiftly taken away by car. Meanwhile, a new clone of Fontaine returns home to continue living his life. In his wounded state, Fontaine wakes up in the laboratory, as was Slick's plan. It turns out that the staged death was meant to get him inside the lab, where he could gather information about Yo-Yo's whereabouts. At the same time, Slick gathers the neighborhood gang and forcibly invades the laboratory through one of the elevators, wreaking havoc in their wake. During the commotion, Yo-Yo becomes subjected to a new hair dye experiment. She pretends to lose consciousness and attacks the lab technicians, managing to escape. In the corridor, she crosses paths with Slick, who confesses his feelings for her. Meanwhile, Fontaine faces his clone, Nixon's guard, and suffers deaf feet right in their fight, only to be taken to Nixon's office. Slick and Yo-Yo release the clones from capacity, but they face an unexpected confrontation with Nixon. In the aftermath of the chaos, Fontaine regains consciousness in Nixon's office, where he is met by the lead geneticist, a much older version of himself. This older Fontaine reveals that he created numerous clones to maintain peace, believing Americans were too divided. He aims to combine Afro-Americans, viewing them as the key to unification. However, Fontaine dreams the idea is absurd. Slick attempts to attack Nixon, but he loses the battle. Yo-Yo surrenders to Nixon. The elder geneticist shares the story of Fontaine's brother, Ronnie's death. He intends to continue his experiments to prevent others from suffering the same fate, but Fontaine isn't going to allow this to continue, and he kills the elderly geneticist. Yo-Yo notices that Slick didn't attack Nixon himself. He sent his clone to distract them. She manages to put Nixon down and save Slick. The news reports the incidents in the neighborhood, and the clones are seen as accepted into society, with people helping them adapt. Slick and Yo-Yo find Fontaine, and Yo-Yo decides to leave for Memphis, with Slick accompanying her. To add to the mystery, the clone of Fontaine wakes up in another city, leading a life identical to the original Fontaine's, living with his mother, exercising, drinking, and losing at the lottery. One day he sees news about the clones, and among them, he spots his true self. And that is the movie, folks! Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and click on the notification bell for good measure. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.